Hello, students. This week, we're going to go over an example of a lesson plan. And last week, you had a chance to go over the basics of lesson planning. You had kind of an introduction to it. And that's what this class is meant for. It's just an introduction. So you're probably already doing some mini lessons, some little short activities with your reading buddy. This is just an introduction to it in this week and last week. And so on the syllabus, it says that I'll be providing an example lesson. And because last week I shared with you 5 popular models of lesson plans, I chose to share with you today an example of a concept attainment lesson. And the reason I'm going to share that with you is because it's probably the least common out of those 5 that are shared. So let me share my screen with you and I will show you what I'm talking about. If you want to go back to the previous week, you can pull this presentation up, but you probably saw this already. So there's 5 popular models. The first one is the direct instruction, or sometimes called the 5-step lesson. It's very common and it matches pretty much the most mainstream lessons you'll see reflect this. Another very common one that you'll see in a lot of classrooms is the cooperative learning lesson plan. You'll also often see some combination of this direct instruction and cooperative learning. Many skilled teachers who are experienced will take their time and combine those aspects of those different kinds of lessons. The other one, the third one here, is concept attainment. That's the one I'm going to share with you today. There's also inquiry and the 5E lesson. So this class and your 407 and your 405 will be giving you an intro to these kinds of lesson planning, but this one is probably the least talked about. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. If you look at the description here, it says a concept attainment lesson uses an inductive structure as opposed to the typical deductive structure. Meaning, instead of the teacher providing information and then adding on that information and defining things for students right away, it's actually the other way around. So students are given facts and things to look at, and then they basically come up with their own explanation for what they're seeing and what they're learning. And so it's sort of taking a backwards approach to teaching a concept. I say backwards not because it's wrong, but because it's just the opposite of what we're used to. It is, however, very, very effective. So I'm going to show you an example of that today. And if you have this presentation from the previous week, this might be a good reference for you in the future to take a look at what the teacher's role and students' roles are in these kinds of lessons. And I'm also providing this example presentation for you. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in presenter view so you can see it. So in this concept attainment lesson, we're going to use a combination of science and social studies standards, and you can take a look at the lesson plan provided on Blackboard for you, which I'll show you in a few moments. But I'm going to go ahead and just go through this because that follows the spirit of concept attainment and what it does. Instead of explaining it all to you in the beginning, it's better to show you and let you think about it. And so if you were my 3rd grade class, I would introduce to you this idea that we are going to look at a lot of items today, and we're going to categorize them. And we're going to categorize them as the yes category or the no category. I'm not telling you what the yes and the no means, because I think you're going to figure it out on your own by looking at what these items are. So I'm going to give you a few to start with, and you're going to follow along and think about what I've said and try to see if you can figure out what the yeses have in common and what the no's have in common. All right, so here we go. The first one is ocean. The ocean is an example of a yes. That would definitely qualify as our yes category. Okay, so think of what the ocean is like, ocean waves, all that categorizes as a yes. An aluminum can would be a no. Okay, so let's keep going and you're going to start seeing some trends here, I think. Coal would be a yes. And if you're not familiar with what coal is, it's basically a rock that people dig out of mines and out of mountains and underground, and it is often used to create fire to burn for heat and energy. Glass. Glass would not be a yes. It would be in the no category. Okay. Pine trees fits in the yes category. Bread fits in the no category. Deer fit in the yes category. Rope fits in the no category. So I wonder if you have already started to figure this out. If you were in a real classroom with classmates, I would ask you to get into a group and brainstorm and discuss together If we were on Zoom, I would tell you to just write it down on your scratch paper. What did all the yes items have in common? I want you to brainstorm and put down some ideas on your scratch paper and think about it. Once you've had a chance to discuss with your group, we would share out loud. Of course, this is an example, so there's no real students here. So you think about what the yeses and what the nos have in common, get some ideas going. We might let them share, but not give them affirmation yet until they've practiced a little bit more. So now I'm going to give you new items, and I'm not going to tell you if it's a yes or a no, and you're going to decide on your own if it's a yes or a no, and you'll write it down. And they do not necessarily go in that order of yes, no, like previously, okay? So here's the first one, money. Do you think that matches the yeses or the nos? Tractor. Does that match the yeses or the nos? Some of these are tricky. Blackberries. Yes or no? River. Yes or no? Would a river be a yes or a no? Sidewalk. What do you think? How about diamond? Would that be a yes or would it be a no? So at this point, after you've seen all those examples, if you were in my class, I would probably give you a handout that had pictures of those items so that you didn't have to write them all down and you could just check yes or no next to it. I want you to take some time to think about it, talk with your partner, decide if you agree or disagree on what your yeses and nos are. If you disagree on any of them, you should go to another group and see what they have and confirm who's right and what you think the answer really is. Okay, we're just exploring right now, so it's okay if we change our mind on something. All right, so what would we name this yes category? If you were a real group of students, I would give you some time now to discuss and share ideas about what we should call those yeses. And if you're struggling to get to it, I would lead you a little bit, but I think students could pretty much come up with something. And here's what we would probably call it, or something like this would be natural resources. All right. The next thing we would do in this lesson is I would have you watch this video. I'm not going to play it on this video because you have access to this presentation and you can click on this link and it will play the video for you. And it's an informational video that explains what natural resources are and which ones are renewable. And that's the essence of our lesson is we're trying to decide how to identify and categorize resources that are natural and renewable, meaning they can be renewed over and over and not used up and then gone, right? So the concluding activity would be to work with groups again and write a definition for natural renewable resources. Now that they've watched an informational video, this should be pretty easy for students, especially if I give them this set of sentence frames to help them out. And let me quickly share with you, there's a couple of resources I've provided. There's also a presentation here on depth of knowledge, since the lesson plan asks for that. This might help you understand it, particularly the slide right here that defines them. So in the future, if you're asked for that, you can refer to this presentation. And this is the presentation I gave you last week, but I'm going to go ahead and upload another copy of that for this week just so you have it available. So real quick, I'm going to go over the lesson plan that is posted in there for you to take a look at. This is a pretty typical format that you're going to see in your credential program. It has a lot of categories on here, so when you first look at it, it can be a little overwhelming. But look at the categories we have to fill out in a lesson plan. We always have to put their standard. And you can see that I picked a third grade social studies standard as well as a third grade science standard because I feel like these go nicely together. I have a description of the content here with our learning outcome. We have our depth of knowledge here defined. We have our language demands and connections in the curriculum. I see a typo here. I'm going to update a new version for you without that typo. And you can see here the steps that I went through. And so if you wanted to have a reference for what you saw in that little sample lesson, this would be a good place to look. It's also a good example of just how to do a very basic lesson plan. Now, this is typically what people use for that direct instruction model, but you can see that I kind of modified it and just used it as concept attainment, which is fine too. What I would do to conclude this, and I put that on here as an application activity, after what you saw, when students wrote their definition, I would ask them to consider what renewable natural resources might be easily found in their area. And we would allow for some discussion and some time to think about what their climate allows, what kind of land use is available, what might be readily available based on those things that they see in their community. And we would then conclude later in the week with a research project that they can all contribute to. So this is an example for you to take a look at. All these resources are available for you on Blackboard. And I hope that is a good resource for you in the future, just to have an example of a concept attainment lesson, since that's the least common shared in our program. But if you have any questions, please let me know, and I can go over any of the other models with you if you need some help.